Welcome back to another episode of Bagels and Bat Flips, where our guest today is Brett Holtz, and he was very nice enough to join us to break down his experience and Team Israel's experience at the European Baseball Championship. Brett, how you doing?
Great to see you as always, Danny. I'm doing well, brother. How are you?
I am good. Well, thank you for coming back on. I appreciate it. And I'm just gonna hop right in here. So for those of for the followers who may not know, how did one, what is the Euros? How often does it take place? And two, how did you guys do overall?
Yeah, so European Baseball Championships is essentially a tournament that takes place every 2 years, right? And it's hosted in a different country throughout Europe each time around. So usually it's the top 16 teams in Europe that qualify for it. And then essentially the way I understand it is it helps with just overarching power rankings, right? So when it comes to things like just world rankings or for eventual placement for things like the Olympic qualifiers, right? So there's no like immediate relevance in the sense of like because we didn't come in first place doesn't mean we can't qualify for the Olympics. It just helps like the better you do in these tournaments, the better position you can be for those eventual qualifying tournaments, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation. Wow, I'm having trouble talking tonight. So, Team Israel, I know, you guys have been on the rise for many, many years now. And it
Hmm.
feels like you guys are finally arrived. I followed a lot of the games, pretty much all of them. And
Hmm.
you guys were never really out of a game. But, what do you think Israel's best like style of play is compared to, the Netherlands, Great Britain,
Hmm.
Germany? Like what sets you guys apart from those teams?
I mean, it's a great question. Again, I think it makes more sense to kind of take a step back, right, and look at the past few years, or at least talk through the past few years of what, the journey Israel baseball's gone through, right? And I think in a lot of ways, if you were to ask around many people or many, different confederations, right, I think what people would come to agree with is that Israel baseball did something that no other kind of country has done before when it comes to these kinds of tournaments, right? Usually when you're part of the national team, you're from the country, right? And I think because of the whole process of Aliyah, right, there were some ways we were able to kind of take advantage of that to be able to get Jewish American baseball players to be able to become Israeli American dual citizens and then be able to be eligible for the team, right? So I think once we did that, once we qualified for the Olympics, many other teams began to follow suit, right? And again, based on the country's history, right? You'll see things like the Netherlands, a lot of their roster is made up of guys from the Caribbean islands, right? Curacao, Aruba, etc. Like we played against some very, very competitive teams. Obviously, the Great Britain game, for example, wasn't our best showing. But again, I think when you ask the question of like what separates us from the others, going into this tournament, really any tournament, but this tournament more specifically, right, there was a huge sense of pride, and we knew that there were bigger things going on besides the actual game of baseball at play, right? So we knew we had a lot of headwinds we were facing. But on top of that, I mean, certain teams have bigger budgets and are able to kind of, work out and train, whether it's all year round together or just get ample time prior to this tournament, right? We didn't have that luxury. So, I think, it's an eclectic mix of guys from different experiences and walks of life and levels of baseball they played at, right? And really just in different phases of life, so it's kind of one of those things you don't really have an idea of who you're going to be playing with and competing with every single day for those 2 weeks until you're ultimately getting there, right? There's only so much group chats can do. There's only so much things over social media can do, but it was a different team than last time, right? But I think in a lot of ways we were seeing the future of Israel baseball unfold, and I'm remaining hopeful, right? Again, we came in seventh place in this tournament out of 16 teams. Certainly not the result that we were hoping for, right? But I think, again, to your point, we were in a lot of these games, right? The Netherlands game, for example, we were in that game till the fifth, sixth inning, So I think it's one of those things where, better cohesion leading up to these tournaments and a few key missing pieces, I think we were placing a lot differently in this tournament.
I do agree. And, I think a big thing also was, like you said, like all different walks of life, kind of all different walks of baseball. Some guys may not have seen a pitch live, like until the first at bat in like 6 months. Like,
Right.
so adjusting to that pitching. And then you have guys like Rosengard, like
Yep.
Rob, right? Like who have been doing this all year, where it's an easier adjustment for guys who maybe haven't. And You
And
know,
that's a very good point you made, Danny, right? It's something to really kind of consider for these tournaments. You get 6 or 7 games max. That's all you get, right? So you have to do your best to show up and show out. And again, like it's one of those things. I know I could have had a better tournament performance wise, but it's like anything else, right? You get to really witness beautiful aspects of the game, right? Like guys picking each other up, like coaches and managers making certain decisions to try to keep us competitive and to ultimately win this game, right? It's very much an exercise of you're either going to be a guy or you're not, or you're going to figure out a way to continue being a guy and supporting those guys around you, right? So it's like anything else with this game, just the matter of the context in which we were playing it in.
absolutely. Now that you made a point saying, you obviously you guys are playing for something more than baseball this time, and that could not be more true. Can you kind of take me through what it was like? One, what has been going on in Israel and the anti-Semitism around the globe.
Hmm.
Not only that, but like you guys playing in a place that's not, I don't want to say like not safe for Jews, but it's definitely not somewhere I would want to find myself as a Jewish person
Yeah,
alone. You know what I mean?
for
So
sure.
how do you and the rest of the team really navigate that?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It was pretty ambiguous at times, right? And I think there was a lot of uncertainty leading up to the actual tournament and leaving for the tournament. Certain things we weren't finding out until days prior, but as it got closer to the tournament and we were being communicated in terms of the level of security that was going to be with us, the measures the tournament themselves were taking to ensure our safety, and really just the overall protocols that we ended up taking. It really, like, I know it's weird to say, I don't think it could have been a better experience for us in the long run in terms of just making sure that we were all safe and we were able to come and go and play baseball to the highest possible level we could and get home safely. Also, I commend, the Israel baseball's leadership as well as, the security we had with us as well as the local police enforcement as well there in Holland. And they were really, it was little things like that. It gave me a lot of hope for what we can see in the world. And it was an eye-opening experience, man. That there were a lot of things that throughout that week. And again, before I go further, Danny, am I the first guy you've met with from the team since the tournament? Is there anyone else you've spoken with? So you haven't
Yeah,
really,
no, I haven't really heard anything. I mean, I spoke to
yeah,
Rosie before, and yeah, so you're the first guy after, so that's kind of why
got
I'm
it.
asking all
Got it.
these behind the scenes
Yeah, man, no, please. So, again, and please tell me to, shut
questions.
up. I want me to, but little things. And again, I have to be mindful as well, right? There are certain things I think just from a security standpoint, I probably shouldn't speak to, and I'm not going to, but very evident things that if you were maybe paying attention on the streaming, you could have seen, right? But we were told each day, leaving. Well, first things first, the first week we were there for training, we had to train it in a completely different part of the country, right? So we had to be away from the rest of the teams. And basically we were told we weren't allowed to wear any gear showing affiliation with Israel baseball or just Israel in general, right? So I was wearing old college gear that I haven't worn in years, right? And things like that on the baseball field again, which felt good in a lot of ways. But again, just very real, right? That you just never know. It could be one person that's just watching our practice, and who knows what could kind of come from that, right? So that in and of itself, was an interesting time, and the weather wasn't the most cooperative, right? So there's just a lot of cold, windy, rainy days. But during that time, right, like guys getting to kind of know each other, the teams beginning to gel a bit, right? Certain guys going, out to dinners together and things like that, right? So that first week was probably the most freedom we had from a security standpoint, right? But then once we eventually traveled to Rotterdam for the actual tournament, right, it was pretty much we were on lockdown, we were on lockdown, right? So the idea of touring the countryside or things like that was just out the window, and rightfully so. It's a large financial commitment on Israel and the government themselves to send security out to be there with us, right? So, it was one of those things where I think a lot of guys were like, wait, we have to be in this hotel for the remainder of the tournament, which was like 11 or 12 days. They were like, yeah, we're sorry, but this is what it's about at the end of the day is making sure you guys get to go home in one piece, right? And so, just at times where it felt like very real, then times that it felt like just surreal. Like, is this actually kind of happening? Like, is this my life right now? And then, come the actual games and even practices at the actual a complex, right? Walking to or from the stadiums, we couldn't wear our gear. We had to turn it inside out. Had to put our hats either, covered by our hoodie or in our bags. There were certain days we were shuttled to the fields, right? In private vans, and then, escorted by our security to the field. Yeah, so again, a lot that kind of went on behind the scenes than as opposed to the actual games themselves. But again, it was just one of those things where looking back on it now, it was probably a little bit weird and scary to go through it for the time, but very grateful that it was just the protocol that we had to be, subjected to because I'm now here and able to speak to you and yeah, so
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know this question you may not be able to answer, but
sure.
you mentioned before other teams having, deeper budgets. Do you think that Israel is kind of at a disadvantage in the fact that, like, I don't know if the extra security costs a lot more money, but
Mm,
could that also be, hey, which is really sad, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to go on a rant, but that could be pulling, a decent amount of budget that could be going into like development, could be going into things that you have said that you guys can't even do because of the
mm.
restriction. Like, I don't know if you
Yeah.
have an
I
answer.
mean, yeah, and even if I did, Danny, I don't know if I'd be at liberty to really speak on that. Here's the one thing I will say, though, that I think can be generally accepted is
Mhm.
that, again, we are very fortunate, right? We get to kind of wake up every day and play baseball and decide and pursue the game of baseball in this context, right? But there is still a war very much going on, right? And I think like anything else in times of war, countries are going to allocate budget and finances to certain causes more than others, right? So
100%.
this was still incredibly important, right? Because we were representative of Israel on the international stage. So they still absolutely allocated X amount of budget. And again, I don't know if that's from the government themselves or Israel baseball themselves. And again, that's not something I feel like I could speak on anyway. But I think the right measures were taken. And I more often than not felt a lot safer than unsafe. So that's all I'll say to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I was coming from more of the fact that it's really sad that it has to be that way
Yeah.
just for Team Israel. Like you said, you're playing baseball, right? You're representing Israel, and like, it's just very,
Yeah, and one thing I will speak on there is, again, when I said hopeful before, right? Hopeful, getting the chance to play against some just like incredible teams and, guys from countries that, whether they're more outwardly anti-Semitic, the countries themselves, not the players, than others, I can't tell you. I think at least one guy per game mentioned to me or basically saying, we're so sorry you guys have to go through this, right? We really empathize with you and just don't think it's fair. I mean, on top of everything else I share with you, right? There was protesting going on pretty much every game. We had our first game against France, we had a 5 hour rain delay, right? So we were already there all day. And then as the game's about to start, a fan with a Palestinian flag runs onto the field and causes another at least 30-minute delay, right? Basically shouting to us that Hamas is going to get all of us, So that was a nice little welcome to Europe in the tournament in and of itself, right? But again, it's just where the world is at right now, but there were certainly little glimpses of hope that I witnessed and I got to experience for sure, And again, a game like baseball or just sports in general can be a uniting platform for such more of the world to, learn from and take as an example for how we could all go about our lives and just coexisting peacefully as possible.
yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it is really cool to hear you say that other people from other teams and countries, said something to you because it really does put it in perspective, like you said. But now I want to get back more into the baseball aspect of
Sure.
things. What do you think were some defining moments or even games in this tournament that kind of really, like, you saw a spark?
Yeah, I mean, a few different moments, right? Obviously, a few different games. Obviously, securing that first win against France was a huge way to set the tone for, the rest of the tournament. And that felt really good, especially after the day that we had, just from a rain delay perspective. And then obviously that incident, Alan Toff throwing a complete game against Switzerland. Like that was epic. And, just saw him being so emotional. And, again, like there are certain guys that just don't know if this will be their last time being able to really wear Israel's colors on the international stage like this. It's just being witness to that, watching Shlomo go out and just do his thing, man. Like, the way he did that last game was just awesome. Bobby Powler had an incredible tournament. Like certain guys, he really showed up and showed out. And it was just fun to be a part of, man. It was fun to contribute to. And again, I just think we didn't ultimately end or place the way that we wanted to place, right? We had a few really tough breaks. We had some really great games that we lost against the Czech Republic, against Germany. That, again, to your point earlier, we were competitive, man. We were in it, and just a few things didn't fall our way. So again, it was just really kind of tough. Just a few more guys to highlight, right? Like, Jason Agresti, showed up, showed out, did his thing, just awesome, just professional through and through. Seeing a younger guy like Arnau, Jake Arnau, step up, excuse me, and have a few great at bats, picking up, in the bullpen, pitchers in the bullpen. It was just, again, like it was fun for me selfishly just to kind of be around that high caliber of baseball,
Mhm.
after 2 years of really not being around it. But yeah, man. So just like really, really cool things to kind of bear witness to, and again, like there's so many different aspects and connecting tissue within the game of baseball, right? Like Rob Power and I have the same alma mater in Columbia University. So to be able to take the field with him another time after doing it in the Czech Republic in 2023, it's just so meaningful, right? He was the reason I wanted to go to Columbia in the first place. Sean Gusenberg is another guy I have to highlight. I mean, I played with him in the Maccabee games in 2017, and 8, 9 years later, here we are, like wearing the same jersey again after leading such different and crazy lives. Just really cool moments for me personally, on top of just being able to kind of witness what some of these guys were able to do, both on and off the field. And obviously, whenever I get time to be with, Fish, and this time around having my dad out coaching, it was just so special, man. Mitch. I mean, all just like incredible guys. Like we could have gone over the tournament and been blown out every single game, but like, it really is the relationships that you just carry with you, this in spite of stats, in spite of how you do. Asaf Lowengar, man, my freaking roommate, the whole time. I love these guys, man. I would do anything for any of them at any point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you kind of answered my next question, but I wanted to ask, how was this tournament different with your dad being on the staff? Because that
Yeah,
could, it could be a really, I mean, obviously it's very emotional for both of you. I
for
mean,
sure, for
where,
sure.
you growing up watching him and now you kind of following in that footstep, now him watching you. So how was
Yeah.
that dynamic? Because
So, no, it's a great
fascinating to hear about
question.
it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was special. It was emotional for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, I mean, more to the point you just kind of mentioned, just again, my 7, 8-year-old self wouldn't believe, right, where I am today, and just seeing the journey that my dad went on with Israel baseball and getting to be a part of it to some extent. Like last tournament I got to play in, he wasn't able to come out. He had a surgery he had done like right before, and he wasn't allowed to fly. And once he got asked to be a part of this, this time around, and he asked me for, if it was okay. He wanted me to give the sign off on it before saying yes. And I was like, dude, of course. Like you're the reason I'm doing this in the first place, and again, obviously my motivation for being a part of this has grown and matured throughout, right? And obviously kind of coming into my own from just the pro-Israel standpoint, and, the Zionism standpoint, everything. But it all started with, my dad and I just in the front yard, hitting off the tee before Mustang Little League, right? And just again, it's something I have to like pinch myself and kind of recognize how lucky and fortunate I am to once will be able to play this game for as long as I have and at the levels I have, but two, having him along for the ride for as long as possible, and ultimately to kind of cap it off the way, like this. It's something I'll be able to tell my kids and grandkids about, and hopefully they can pass it on to theirs. I mean, it's just so special.
100%. I mean, to this day, I remember when people first asked me, how'd you get introduced to Israel baseball? It's your dad. Your dad is the first person that comes into my mind because I remember going to my synagogue and your dad was there speaking. Like, I
Mm,
didn't know who he was at this point. I was like probably like 8 or 9,
yeah,
like, no, I was probably like 10 or 11. That was like the first year I remember that the league was going on in Israel. Like, I remember all of that, like how big of a deal that was. I mean,
sure.
now I realize it was a much bigger deal than at that time, obviously, but I remember it was your dad and it was some other people from Israel baseball. I mean, could have been
That's
other people that,
yeah, sorry to cut you off, Danny. My point, and again, I think that was really, at least from my understanding, like the first true iteration of like serious baseball in Israel, right? With the IBL back in 2007. And just to kind of see the things that have transpired since, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, but overall, so much good has come, right? Israel's in the World Baseball Classic since what, 2021 at least, right? I could be wrong. If someone could fact check me on that, but incredible, dude, right? Went to the Olympics. I believe it was the first team sport Israel's sent to the Olympics since the 72 Munich Games, right? Like very much a part of history, and again, like it's funny, but it's my father, right? My father is very much at the helm of that all. And it will never be lost on me for, if people identify me as Eric's son, that's the greatest honor I think I could ever bestow in this lifetime. It's something that I hold proudly. And, again, like he introduced me to Israel baseball, but again, if this is where I leave things, I'm okay, right? I think I've been able to lead a very, very interesting and unique baseball career, but to kind of finish it with the man I started all with, it's something out of, a storybook, right? Or a movie. I don't know.
I mean, absolutely. And I think Israel was in the World Baseball Classic in 2017 as well.
Okay, well, thank you
But
for
yeah,
that.
and like that's just such a cool experience, to just share with your father because I mean, it's like once in a lifetime, for
Sure. It,
multitude of reasons.
and again, like, I'll be honest with you, right? I'm not gonna lie to you or the viewers. Like there were times, right? Like I said, I didn't have the best tournament from a performance standpoint, and there were certainly games, right? Like it was like my tail between my legs. And again, my dad being the way he was with me my entire life, talking with me the same way he would talk with me. In a lot of ways, it felt good to go back into that, that world a bit, that time in my life a bit. It's just funny now as a 26-year-old man, right? Like, you'd think I'd be able to kind of understand or integrate some of these things into my own performance, but there's just something to be said about, just a very caring and involved father. I mean, I'll always take his advice whenever, and a lot of it's just a gut checking and him being like, dude, you got this, right? Like believe in yourself and just go out there and do what you do, right? And leave it all out there regardless of the end result, So just even to get that kick in the ass from him when I needed it at that point in the tournament, I mean, it's just amazing. Just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I kind of want to dig into your individual performance just a little bit, like kind of what things you did well, what things you feel like maybe you could have done better, because I think it's important for the viewers to know, what do you, but like, kind of like walk me through your process when you step up to
Sure.
the plate, like, your first at bat of the tournament, like, what is going through your mind?
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, the first at bat for sure I actually remember because, I think again, like numbers wouldn't reflect it, but I don't feel like I had overall that many bad at bats. I certainly did have some, but I also felt like I hit a lot of balls hard at people, right? So even my first at bat against France, I believe the pitcher was in the minor leagues, right? Or recently released from the minor league. So legit pro arm. Here I am facing at most 85, during my summer men's league season. I was just locking in, man. Again, like I'm a guy who really tries to keep things loose. I'm a guy who, I'm the one who brings the music into the dugout pregame and during BP, right? I'm the guy trying to bring that kind of vibe. But also, when it comes to knowing the job I gotta do, I'm gonna lock in and know again what I need to do and focus on what I need to. And like anything else, my job always, regardless of the context in baseball, is how can I put a ball hard in play, right? I can't control hits, I can't control those kinds of outcomes, right? But I can control my approach, my mindset going up to the plate, right? So, earlier on in the tournament, it was very much that, right? What is my job to do here and now? How can I remain or try to be a leader to the best extent possible, right? And again, it's very difficult to do when, considering all the other factors, right? And these are guys that some of them I know and haven't seen since the last tournament in 2 years, and some of them I'm just meeting for the first time, right? So it's kind of tough to try to be that captain-like figure on top of maybe not performing the way you would like to be and perceived as not, right? So there was a lot of those kinds of things, and again, right, I ended up DHing most of the tournament when I did start. I played one game in the field against the Netherlands, which was a lot of fun, and again, I think I held my own that game pretty well at first base. So, again, like, it is what it is, right? And Rob Pallor really helped me kind of wrap my head around this perspective of, these tournaments, man, it's a crapshoot, right? There, you
Oh
could
yeah.
do so much, and that's like anything in sports, right? You could do so much to prepare and get yourself ready, but then the results are just what they are, right? Just because you prepare a certain way doesn't mean that the results are going to be X, X.
Right.
So, I think in a lot of ways it was a very humbling lesson for me because it's not like I did anything different than the last time I came out to the tournament in 2023, right? It's how the cookie crumbles sometimes, and yeah, so I'll pause there and see if you have anything else for me.
I mean, look, I mean, like you said, but I mean, being the captain, like figure two, like, I mean, that comes with a lot of challenge, like you said. I mean, like from watching your at bats, like that's the one thing like the average baseball fan doesn't really, or not the
Mm,
average baseball fan, like, oh, like if you're looking at your numbers, oh, you only hit this, but it's like, okay, but like what were his bat like? Was he battling? Was he just, was it 1, 2, 3? And like you battled a lot, you know,
yeah, I
and
appreciate that.
and especially against like some of these teams, like in the Netherlands, like you play first base, like you're gonna impact the game in the field, not just at the
I,
plate, So I think, and also like DHing is just hard, especially like when it's cold, when it's raining, when you just kind of have to stand around and wait,
yeah, I mean,
you know.
I'm not here to ever make excuses. I think it's one of the easiest things people do in life, let alone athletes. But yeah, man, I mean, there were certainly those aspects, contributing to what I felt wasn't my best performance. I did get sick towards the end, like the last 2 or 3 games. On top of, I think I sprained my finger as well as kind of like slightly strained my right leg. I felt like I was just breaking down, man. So to your point, like, what can I just like? And my, Coach Peretti from Columbia, like he instilled this saying in me. He instilled this saying in me, right? Just give 100% of what you have that day, right? So that was very much the mentality too, right? Yes, like no athlete plays 100% healthy ever, right? It's just not
Yep.
the nature of any sports or any competition like context. It's just strap up and do what you can, right? And at the same time, and that's what's so beautiful about team sports is, you know what? I wasn't a guy in certain moments of the game or right? Coaching staff had to make certain decisions and other guys got to shine, right? That's what I'm saying. A guy like Arnow, I'm so happy for him, right? Like this guy is a stud catcher out of Yeshiva, and who's to see, right? Who's to know what's going to come from him in terms of continuing with Israel baseball, and I hope it's for a very long time, right? But that's what's so beautiful about team sports, where if you're a guy who it's not like they don't trust in you, but hey, maybe it's just time to give you a break, or you don't like this matchup, right? Lefty on lefty, for example, we're going to put him in. That makes sense, right? It's not always a matter of God, I suck. God, what did I do wrong? They all hate me. I shouldn't be here, right? It's
Right.
just understanding that there are bigger things at play here going on.
Yeah. And that's like a very baseball thing too. Very baseball is very it can get very analytical and it can get
Of
very
course.
matchup based. And I think that's a really important thing too. You just said, especially like the kids out there listening or fighting for a spot. You may not always get it at first, but keep going. Like find another way that you can help the team. Whether that's be like the fastest guy to get water, or be like the fastest guy to help if they need a runner. Like run, like show up in other ways. And I think that's a really good point you made. My last question for you, I think, is who would you give MVP for Team Israel the tournament to? I know it might be very tough, but who would you give it to?
Man, that is really tough, man. Honestly, I'm just, I think a big part of these tournaments is just consistency from game one through game, 6 or 7. If I'm being honest with you, I don't know if anyone really had just a complete standout performance, game after game after game, but I really think, a few guys come to mind for me. Jake Fishman,
Mhm.
lefty pitcher, just kind of he came in and just did his thing, dude. Like he's a professional through and through. It's just really fun to watch him compete. And, again, for those of you who don't know who Jake Fishman is, please look him up. One of the most uncomfortable at bats you will have in your life. I had the honor of getting to face him in inter squads in the training weekend. It was not fun, and it was a pretty quick at bat. So, he just stepped up plenty of times, and whether it was starting certain games or just coming into relief, like he's a guy I'd give a nod to. Rob Paller, honestly, is another guy I'd just give a nod to from an offensive standpoint. He was a guy that was just like, again, I would say, in being the most consistent throughout the tournament. I think it's more him if anyone else. So those would be the few guys. But again, it's always tough with these tournaments, man. There are guys who step up in other ways and shapes and forms, and it's just fun. It's just fun to be a part of. So yeah, but to answer your question, it would be those two guys. If I'm
Well,
missing anyone else too, if I'm completely off the radar, sorry, team and staff. But yeah,
and for those listening, also, I think Fishman, right? He just came out Pitch Lab, right?
yes, he
App.
did.
Yeah, that looks very cool. I'm excited to kind of dive in there. But Brett, thank you so much again for coming on, taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know it's very busy, and I just want to thank you one more time.
Danny, it's an absolute pleasure to support you and the brand and have me on again, man. I'm happy to chat whenever, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.